the question that we're going to go through today then is, how does Priestley use the character of the inspector to highlight societal issues? Before we even make a start on the extract analysis itself, we need to be very, very clear about the societal issues that we assume that Priestley is talking about. What sort of societal issues do we need to take into account specifically with this question, do you think? What issues around society? Good. Concepts surrounding capitalism and socialism then. Okay, they are the first things that we need to think of or bring to mind. Okay? Right, now, which of these two options or headings does Priestley fall into personally? Where do his beliefs align him? Good, so Priestley himself is a socialist. What are the beliefs of socialism? What do they tend to believe in? Kernaghan, what do you think?
Everyone should be equal.
Okay, so people are equal. Okay, it's concept of equality. What else? If we think about distribution of wealth and money, okay, the wealth should be shared fairly. Okay, what about capitalism then?
You work for what?
Yeah, you work for you work for your wage.
Yeah.
Okay, you work for your wage. What else? Yeah, it's there is a very much a selfishness surrounding capitalism, isn't there? Okay.
You can inherit wealth.
Good idea of wealth being inherited as well. Okay. Now, how does Priestley feel towards capitalism? We know this throughout our study of the text as a whole. What are his overall attitudes towards capitalist ideals or capitalist opinions or beliefs? Good. He believes themselves that they're greedy. So he's approaching ideas surrounding greed within his text. That would be one of those perhaps societal issues that we have to consider. Greed. What else? What other issues does he approach when it comes to the Burling family? Yeah?
For equal, and it's like about the women and how, like, that's it.
Yeah, patriarchal societies. Okay, so looking at that idea of the men being permanently in control and dominating what women do. I want you to think of the conversation. It's not long after the inspector arrives within the text. And he starts talking to Mr. Burling about his relationship with Eva Smith, how Mr. Burling is involved. What is Mr. Burling's involvement again?
Wasn't he the manager, the boss of Eva Smith?
He owns that Burling company. He was Eva Smith's boss. And he sacks her because she wanted more money. Good. And she took everybody on strike in order to complain and to protest their salary and their wage, didn't she? Okay. Why did he refuse it? Why fundamentally, like at its complete root core, why did Mr. Burling refuse to increase the pay of Eva Smith and the other women working in the factory?
Didn't give an offer first, but just Eva done raise and not get it.
It's implied that he offered Eva that money, but he wouldn't give it to everybody else. Why?
Because it would be affecting the profit.
Yeah, because it would affect the profit of the company. It would affect the amount of money that Burling and his family and the owners could potentially walk away with. Now, an idea that I know some of you have discussed with your class teachers is the concept that Priestley views capitalists as parasites. Okay, he views them as parasites in that they feed off of the work of their employees. Okay, Mr. Burnham is a parasite. All of his workers underneath him work, 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 work. The only person that reaps any benefit is Burling, the parasite. He gives nothing back to the employers. Yes, he does pay them, okay, but there's no special wage. There is nothing particular. He says he pays them no more or less than any other person in his position. Okay, now to approach Burling or any character as a parasite is obviously a profoundly negative opinion for Priestley to have. We know that Priestley hates this capitalism. We know that he was an ardent, strong socialist all the way through. So if we can use this concept of this parasitical presence of capitalism within society, and if we can incorporate that into our analysis, that is going to start pushing us towards that top-bound response where we are conceptualised, where we have something that we are feeding back into. Okay? So let's just remember that idea of capitalism or capitalists feeding on other people. Right. Let's approach this extract then. Obviously, very important to remember that in the exam you will not have an extract to use. But given this is revision, it's always useful to have something to begin with at this opening stage. So, this is taken from the inspector during Act 3. This is the inspector's final speech. This is his big moment, if you like, where he starts making some very profound, far-reaching statements. So we're going to go through it, a couple of lines at a time, and if you've got anything to add or contribute, please tell me and I'll whack it straight on this sheet. Okay? So, but just remember this. One Eva Smith has gone, but there are millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths still left with us. What can we say about that?
That wasn't necessarily other people about Eva Smith, but could kill herself.
Okay, so we're talking about all of these people who could find themselves in a similar situation to Eva Smith. Okay, good. So you've got lots of other individuals that are potentially suffering. Okay, they are suffering or that they are incredibly poor. Yeah?
The fact that it's called Eva Smith and John Smith, it's like quite common, so it could represent everyone.
Good, fantastic. The Smith surname, okay, on its own is incredibly common, isn't it? Okay, so this idea of Eva Smith, could we say that she is a symbol for something? Or let's think about societal issues. Let's think about our question up here. What sort of societal issues might Eva Smith be a symbol of? Okay, good. So Eva Smith then, or any Smith in this sense, is symbolic of the lower classes. We might be slightly more precise and maybe say the working classes. Okay, if we were going to be entirely accurate there. Okay. Notice that we've got that term symbolic, symbolism itself being one of those literary devices that we can use frequently, that we can always go back to. Okay, millions and millions as well. Device? We have got repetition of millions, but what is the overall effect created? Not that. Okay, what is the inspector doing here? It's hyperbole, isn't it? Because it is that extreme exaggeration. So this repetition and its effect is that it is hyperbolic, or it hyperbolizes the sheer number of people that could potentially be affected by this similar situation. Yeah, or hyperbole itself is used for exaggeration and emphasis purposes. If you wanted to whack that in there as well, you obviously can do it. Okay, so there are millions and millions of Eva Smith and John Smith still left with us, with their lives, their hopes and fears, their suffering and chance of happiness. What's going on here? Okay, still left with us, with their lives, their hopes and fears. What can you tell me about this sort of the wording? What is the inspector attempting to achieve here? Yeah, to make them feel guilty. He's given us all of these very human characteristics and emotions. Okay. Yes, we have lives, which is fairly obvious to us, but we've got hopes, fears, suffering, chance of happiness. Okay. We have. Look at these two ideas here: hopes and fears. What are they? What is being used here? Juxtaposition. We have these juxtaposing concepts, okay, of hope and fear, suffering and happiness. Why? Why is that being used at all here? Okay, these juxtaposing concepts all the way through. What is Priestley perhaps saying about human life, about human existence? Okay, there's always, but life itself is a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it? Okay, people are made up. People experience suffering. They experience happiness. They are hopeful, and yet they are fearful. He's saying that humanity itself is complex, that it's complicated. Okay, and that we have to accept that and acknowledge that before we can do anything about it. Okay, all intertwined with our lives and what we think and say and do. What we think and say and do. Okay, you have all of these actions or this concept of actions as well. One other thing that is occurring throughout this as well. Okay, if I draw your attention here, with us. Okay. With our lives, what we think and say and do. We don't live alone. We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. We have got this concept of socialism introduced to us here. How? How is socialism being introduced?
It's like all of us together.
Good. Everyone together. Supporting one another. Can you remember the quote that Mr. Burling used very early on to talk about people in the world in general, like we're all good, like bees in a hive? Okay, Burling was obviously incredibly against that, and yet that bees in a hive, that imagery of everyone being involved, everyone participating, is actually what we're drawn to here. Okay. If I start us off here then, so we don't live alone. What sort of sentence is that? We don't live alone. Can anyone suggest to me the type or even the function of that sentence? We don't live alone. Say that again?
Statement.
It is making a statement and is therefore a declarative sentence. Okay, it is declaring something in this instance. Okay. Why does he make this statement?
To say like,
how does he frame it? It feels very, very factual, very true, very, very almost honest. Okay. We are members of one body. This is a quote that we always refer back to. What is going on here? What's this? We are members of one body. What device is being used first of all? Yeah.
I don't know what the device is, but it just means that they're like all working together and like working together as a community.
Okay, so that one body then represents community. Okay, what device is happening here? Okay. Got a metaphor here for our community or for society even. Okay, one body itself. What other text do we link this to rather often?
Bible.
What, the Bible? Why the Bible?
Because it's like a quote
Okay, it is biblical in its origins. It is that biblical allusion to everyone being sort of part of this one united world. Okay, it's a biblical allusion here. Okay, in a biblical context. One body as well, if we think of the structure of the body, the components, it's still that image of everyone being almost like a small unit but a necessary piece, that everyone comes together and everyone contributes and everyone is necessary, and so we have to take care of everyone in that unit. We are responsible for each other, and I tell you that time will come soon when if men will not learn that lesson, then they will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. Okay, before I pull you on to this quote, there is something I want you to see here, or something I want you to notice. We had this frequent, I realised that I missed the terminology as well, these personal pronouns. Okay, I realise there is the urge to call these collective pronouns. They are not collective pronouns. The effect of these pronouns is that they create this idea of collective responsibility, because they are plural, they group people together. But collective pronoun is not the word class that these would belong to, or a group pronoun. Okay, how have these pronouns changed here? We've gone from we to they. What's the difference?
Like people which there is
Okay, so people like the Eva Smiths and John Smiths could end up dying, but think about it. We need this. We think. We don't live alone. We are members of one body. We are responsible. Yes?
Is it maybe the people that are like capitalists, like it's the socialist people that are together and then the versus the capitalist?
Yeah, fantastic. We have this contrast that is put in front of us here then, that we, and whenever we is used in this text, it actually refers to we, the socialists. And the they refers to the capitalists. Throughout this whole extract, we have the inspector talking. We. He includes himself, and the inspector, we know, is Priestley's mouthpiece. We know that the inspector is Priestley's mouthpiece. He involves himself here as well by including that pronoun we. Okay? And yet, at the end, it shifts to they will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. Why?
I was going to say, like, can they also represent how the younger generation will face these problems, and then, like, the leaders, how they've just been thrown in. So, like, I don't know, because the readers that are reading this, they just want to, like, everyone.
The audience that are watching it, remember, you have to approach it as a play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've just gone through everyone the same way, with a fire and blood and anguish. That could represent the long time they've gone through.
Yeah, perfect. We know this fire and blood and anguish represents 2 world wars. Okay, we have fire, blood, anguish. We have this triplet here. Or you could refer to it as a tripartite structure. Either one will do. Okay. One thing we missed earlier up here as well was think, say, do. We have another triplet higher up. And yes, we know that refers to the war, but again, we're talking about this they. This they really stands out to me.
In war, it's like leveler, so it shows like everyone's at the same sort of level.
Yeah, good. We've got war being this great level. It levels the playing field for everybody. Everybody ends up on the exact same footing, on the exact same position, in the exact same danger. And there is no they left, realistically. The way I'm seeing this is that we are members of one body, is that the way Priestley views it and his mouthpiece, the inspector, is delivering this, is that we, the individuals, the ones who are considerate of those around us, we are safe. Okay? It is those who don't learn. They are the ones who will be punished in fire and blood and anguish. What sort of imagery does that conjure? Not just war, but what other kind of imagery? Hell. Okay? Okay? This imagery itself is obviously incredibly powerful. They will be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. And yet, 2 world wars still occurred. So what is perhaps Priestley's comment that he's making almost directly to his audience, because his characters won't really understand that at the time because of what device?
Foreshadowing.
Not foreshadowing. Well, this is foreshadowing. Okay. Good. But we are talking about the dramatic irony here. I'm running out of space. Okay. Yes, we are talking about that dramatic irony. But what I'm trying to get at here is that it's almost that people didn't learn. That's his message. Okay? You had all of this to come, and yet over 30 years later, from when the play is set to when the play is written, nobody learnt their lesson. Capitalism existed. And it wasn't they who were taught it. It wasn't just that small pocket who were left because socialism had taken over and socialism had fixed the world. But it was everyone was punished. Everyone was part of this they, was part of that third person, that distanced group, because nobody learned from anything that happened before that Second World War. Priestley is saying that now is the opportunity to fix society, to make the changes necessary to avoid any future fire and blood and anguish. Okay? Right. I'll awfully drive through it now as well. We're going to move on. We're going to try and actually start modelling and putting a response together. Okay? I would like you guys to contribute, to lead me through certain ideas, to tell me how I need to begin, and I will tweak and polish where necessary. I will also make mistakes as well. I will obviously correct those as I go. If there's anything that I write that you don't like, or you think sounds stupid, or isn't accurate enough, tell me, and I will fix it as I go. Okay? So, yeah. Yes. Okay. We have about 15 minutes left, okay, to put this modelled response together. So we will try and we won't obviously get a full response, you can't manage it in 15 minutes. If we can get a very brief but yet focused introduction, we'll do that, and then we're going to start putting our first paragraph together. So, first of all, okay, we need to have our question here. And now, as a reminder, and I know because the question paper is out the way, I'm going to leave at the top here societal issues. Okay, just so that we know while we're reading through this, while we're writing our responses, that everything we discuss must refer back to this topic. Okay, that is what the question wants us to focus on. Okay, remember the inspector himself is obviously that other significant figure. So, if you were going to answer that question for me very briefly in one word, what would you say for that opening line? Okay, let me start off then. So, reposition this. So, in Priestley's 1945 play, and in Spectacles. he utilises. What should we go for? What do we think about he utilises the character the inspector to highlight. I don't know what's going on here. To highlight the issues that plagued society. No, that plagued is that. So in Priestley's 1945 play *In Spectacles*, he utilised the character of the inspector to highlight the issues that plagued that post-war society. His post-war society.
Yeah.
Just get rid of that.
Yeah.
Agreed. Sounds better. That plagued post-war society. These issues are ones. Oh, where should we go with this? What issues are we looking at? What issues are we considering here? What do you think that's the most significant one that he fights against? We could almost look at one issue just throughout the text if we wanted to. What about the greed of capitalism? Yeah? Okay, because that is what we discussed and what we included up here. We looked at greed, capitalism, socialism. We did link to patriarchal society, and we can always try and creep in parasite somewhere. Okay, so Priestley please make sure that if you're copying this down, you are spelling Priestley correctly. L-E-Y at the end. Okay, remember this is the first question on the exam paper, on literature paper 2, so you are awarded AO4 marks, which are for spelling, punctuation and grammar. Okay, don't mess up the playwright's name. Okay, that's a really easy way to lose those marks. Okay, so Priestley focuses his text on the parasitical nature of which right. Priestley's 1945 play in Priestley's 1945 play *In Spectacles*, he utilised the character of the inspector to highlight the issues that plagued post-war society. Priestley focuses his text on the parasitical nature of greedy capitalism, which, being an ardent socialist, he was strongly against. Do we think we can move straight on, or should we say something else briefly about the inspector before we go?
I don't know what ardent means.
Strong. Yeah. I realise I'm using that upscale vocabulary as well. Still push yourself with the vocab choices that you make here. Okay, you don't want it to be oversimplified. Okay. Equally, you don't want to overcomplicate it, so use vocab you are comfortable with. Just something that's challenging. Right. So I said the inspector becomes, or as his mouthpiece, Priestley, the inspector, sorry. Inspector serves, not as, serves to So, as his mouthpiece, the inspector serves to spread the knowledge of the consequences of unchecked capitalism on innocent lives. Do we like this as an introduction?
Yeah.
Is there anything here that we don't like or that we don't think sounds right? Please tell me now and I'll get rid of it. No, but is this something you would be happy to have written in front of you for an essay?
Yeah.
Yes? Right, let's keep going. Right, we need our... Pardon? I thought you had beef with it. I thought you wanted me to change something. Right. Let's get our first paragraph.
Oh, I liked it.
Just so you know, that will have been picked up by that.
No. Oh, God.
Yes. Okay. First paragraph then. So what do we want to look at first? Let's look at our extract here. Now, obviously, again, be reminded that we don't have an extract to look at in the exam. We're just using this now to help us out a bit. What do you want to focus on?
Oh no, I was just going to say, could you go back to the paragraph?
I will. Give me. Can you see it still on there? Yeah. What? Somebody tell me. What do you want to focus on first? What are we focusing on first in this extract? What quote or idea are you perhaps most confident with, or can you most confidently discuss that links to the idea of greed, perhaps? What about if we move sort of chronologically down this extract? What if we started with millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths? Yeah? Right. So if we just provide a little bit of context for this final speech then. So in his final... How would you describe this whole speech? I'd say it's a bit ranty, but I don't really want to use that word.
Warning, sort of.
In his final warning, yeah? Anything else? Any other alternatives? So let's go with warning then. In his final warning speech... Or in his final speech, the inspector warns the Burling family of what? If he's saying that there are millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths, he's warning them about what?
Of their mistakes.
He's warning them to not, or advising them, encouraging them. He's warning them of the consequences of what?
Capitalism.
Of their actions. Okay, he states there are millions and millions of Eva Smiths. We can leave the John Smiths out for a minute and come back to that in a second to almost to reinforce our point. To do what? Why does he state this? To what? To emphasise. Keep going. Was that? Yep. I said the far-reaching. Of what? Don't just say their actions again. We need to try and vary the impact of what? Well, remember, we're almost zooming on the side of greed that we had up here, aren't we? So I want to say the impact of greed on others. Yeah? The impact of, greed. Point while, it was a comma and then I changed my mind. So the repetition of millions both hyperbolizes the inspector's point while reinforces the serious consequences. I feel like I'm using consequences too much. Serious consequences. Serious, life-threatening. I'll stick with consequence. Consequence will work better in this situation. Think how to finish this in front of us and get to ones with how many other actions. It's relevant to this message to emphasise the far-reaching impact of greed on others. The repetition of millions both hyperbolise the inspector's point while reinforcing the serious, life-threatening consequences that impact others. Priestley's use of the common surname Smith becomes what? Smith becomes symbolic of what? Finish it off for me.
The normal everyday people that are affected.
Should we bring in that concept of class though? So we would say almost like the working class, wouldn't we? Okay? Becomes symbolic of the working class. employed by the likes of Berlin. Okay. Furthermore, it suggests that it is only the common people who ever seem to feel or bear the consequences of these actions. Right, we're going to link it finally just to some aspects of the context before we finish, and I will let you go. Yeah. Got the back of your page. Okay, just what sort of final ideas can we include here, just to link this to that relevant context that we all know so much about. So, give me something about Priestley's opinions here that I can just wrote back. Okay. So furthermore, it suggests that it is only ever the common people who bear the brunt of these actions. Okay. Priestley's understanding of what modern day events or the use of dramatic irony. What we're going to incorporate here. We talk about when the play was written and when the play was set. Having written the play, over 30 years after it was set, in 1912, Priestley is abundantly aware Priestley is aware of historical events that affected the poor. Let's think of those people, the ones that affected the poor, that affected the innocent. That have performed made resulted. Okay. We're going to leave that there today. Okay? Because it is time for you guys to go home. So,